the roll, please.
Councilmember Wengert,
Here.
Councilmember Richards,
Here.
Councilmember Hughes,
Here.
Vice Mayor Derwin,
Here.
Mayor Alves.
Here. Okay, we'll begin with oral communications. Does anyone wish to address the council on an item not on tonight's agenda? Rita has her hand up. Go ahead, Rita.
Hold on, Rita. There you go. You need to unmute at your end.
Yeah, there's a comment. I have a comment about the social justice issue concerning the update of what was.
Rita, okay, that's actually on the agenda. It's in the digests. We'll do that later.
Well, I'll wait till that time then.
Thank you. Okay. Any other comments on items not on tonight's agenda? Okay, seeing none, I will take does anyone want to pull anything from tonight's consent agenda? John.
I'd like to pull item 4.
Item 4. Any others? Okay, if that's the case, I will take a motion on items 1, 2, and 3.
I move approval of the consent agenda items 1, 2, 3.
Second.
Okay, moved by Craig, seconded by Mary Ann. Roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Wengert,
Aye.
Councilmember Richards,
Aye.
Councilmember Hughes,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Derwin,
Aye.
Mayor Alves.
Aye. Okay, motion passes. Item 4, John.
Yeah, I just wanted to address the fact that I understand the importance of this move at this point, given all the upheaval in our ability to service people and to have people in the office and all of that. But I wanted to just bring attention to the fact that long term, we really want to have special, have a contractor services be probably exclusively for special operations, special projects such as the general plan issues and housing, upcoming RENA issues. So I just wanted to bring it up that this is something that long term we want to have people on board in our town offices that really know the town rather than contract people.
Yeah, that's a fair point. Jeremy, do you want to say anything to that, or?
Yes, I'm happy to. Through the mayor, as the council knows, the budget for 1920 included funding and an FTE for a senior/associate planner. We made an attempt to fill that position early in the fiscal year, and unfortunately, we're unable to at that point because of those challenges. Shifted to a model where we were utilizing some services with Good City. The flexibility, as John mentioned, is useful in the short term given everything that's happening. The long-term recommendation from staff is to keep the FTE in place, not get rid of it, but instead fund through this contract the services that we need for a period of time. But long-term, the desire is to have the position fully filled on staff.
Ann, go ahead.
Yeah, and thank you for that explanation, Jeremy. I think just as a follow-on to what John said, one of the things that when I looked at it, I think the contract extension is great, and I know the firm and some of the principals, and they're really very capable. I think the question in my head, though, was as you're developing the budget, and I know we're going to be dealing with that shortly, what are you projecting in terms of how much use or how many dollars you think we'll spend in this category over the next 12 months, during this next fiscal year, which we're already in, so it's not even 12, but, the
Right.
remaining time, it'll be 9 months by the time we get it in.
Through the chair, it does depend on how much work we're able to accomplish around the special projects primarily. I think the general plan update, depending on when that starts in the third or fourth quarter of this year, would certainly be a primary expenditure out of there. I don't necessarily anticipate spending the full $100,000, depending on Laura's coming back at some point, and we may make some tweaks to the current planning use that we have right now, depending on its need. It also depends on special projects that are happening over the next year related to large scale land use development projects and how much time we need from additional resources there. Some of that's pass-through though, so it just depends on the backup that Laura needs. I would be surprised if we spent the full amount, but having that amount of flexibility is pretty useful just given the uncertainty over the next year.
Great, thank you.
Any other comments on item 4? Then I could take a motion to approve.
Motion to approve?
Second?
Okay, moved by Mary Ann, seconded by Ann. Sharon, roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Wengert,
Aye.
Councilmember Richards,
Aye.
Councilmember Hughes,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Derwin,
Aye.
Mayor Alves.
Aye. Okay, motion passes. That brings us to item 5, which is a report of an update on the race and equity conversation. Is this, Jeremy, are you starting this, or are Mary Ann and John presenting?
I will be starting it. Thank you, Mr.
Okay.
Mayor. Mayor Alves, members of the council, what I would like to start with is actually an introduction. You see on your screen a new face. This is Brandon. They are our newest
Hello.
intern.
Hello.
We met Brandon through the work that they and their colleagues were doing recently related to the review of the efficacy of the Los Trancos Woods Vista Verde Vegetation Management Home Hardening Program. And I was so impressed with the work of Brandon and their colleagues that I offered to the entire group, if you'd like to intern in town, we'd be happy to have you. And Brandon took me up on the call. I want to introduce Brandon a little bit more. I found some information about you online. I hope it's all correct. Let me pull that up. So Brandon just graduated from Stanford University, and now they're in the market looking for work. Got a few things going right now. I hope he enjoys what you're doing so far. They majored in public policy with a minor in psychology, and they worked very hard on queer and trans rights at Stanford University. I've been really impressed with their interest in working with me and my staff on these issues, including the use of pronouns, as you can hear tonight. It's very important. According to your bio, you're an avid writer and dancer, and you spend your free time musing from one artistic project to the next. So, sorry, I embarrassed you a little bit. I get to do that, I guess. Brandon, did you want to say anything else about yourself or the work that you're doing right now?
Sure. I believe I'll be elaborating a little bit more in detail later on, but I have definitely appreciated just the opportunity to work with all of you, especially on the Race and Equity Project, and then also onboarding onto the sustainability project. I have been trying to, I guess, find the place that I fit in different change-making work, and it's been an absolute joy getting to get a bit of experience in local government and see what working to build change looks like in this venue. So I really appreciate working with you all, and I can't wait to see what we get to build together during my time working with you.
I'd like to add that some of the additional work Brandon will be doing is related to the Climate Action Plan. So on September 9th, Brandon will be part of that, presentations to the council. Brandon's been also tasked with the development of a sustainable team committee. So they've started that work as well. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Vice Mayor and Council Member Richards for the bulk of the presentation. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeremy. I just wanted to say we are so fortunate to be able to work with Brandon. He is an absolute joy to be around, and his work is stellar. So thank you, Brandon. Thank you, Jeremy, for finding Brandon. So the three of us have been very busy working, and we are very excited tonight to share our proposal for 3 virtual events on the topics of policing in the sheriff's office, implicit bias, and understanding the history of residential segregation in southern San Mateo County. The first one, policing in the sheriff's office post George Floyd, and that is a working title. We are in the process of inviting panelists. So far, we have confirmed Sheriff Carlos Bolanos. And by the way, he has never done, this is the first one he has agreed to do, first public forum of this type. DA Steve Wegstaff, I have not seen him do one of these either. Of course, our own captain, Christina Corpus. Reverend Lori Carter Owens, she is the president of the San Mateo branch of the NAACP. Henrietta Burrows, who is the executive director of the EPA Center for Community Media. She has agreed to be our moderator, and I have been a big fan of Henrietta's for, geez, probably 15 years. We are waiting for responses from a young man, Des Frazier. You should look him up. He has a really amazing website. He was an organizer in the Redwood City Black Lives Matter protest. He is, I believe, 20 years old. Graduated from Sequoia High School 2 years ago and is at Menlo College. And I am waiting on an attorney on the criminal justice panel of the private defender's office who is a friend of my friend. In San Mateo County, we don't have public defenders, we have private defenders. So we'd have a DA and we'd have a private defender. And then I still have to reach out to one person. I don't want to say his name. He is a luminary. It would be a gift if we were able to get him. I think it's a long shot, but I'm going to try. So once the panelists are finalized, we will choose a date, which will be in late September, October, and we'll make it happen. The second subject matter, implicit bias, there will be an event. This is sponsored by the library. We've been working with the library. They have agreed to bring Stanford professor Jennifer Eberhardt, who wrote the book Biased, to us. She will do a Zoom, I guess, author event. I'm not exactly sure how it will be structured. And the community will have the opportunity to read the book before she comes. And we did talk to Anne-Marie Despain, who is the executive director of the Library JPA, about book availability because it's been tough. And she said that they've created an always available social justice book list that will allow simultaneous use and have no limit to how long you can keep it. And I believe those will be ebooks and audio. The Library JPA director said that she hopes to announce the date by the end of the week. They're working with Ms. Eberhardt's publisher. Let's see. John's going to talk about the last proposal, but I wanted to mention that prior to each event, we will encourage residents to submit questions for the panelists or the author through our website portal. I also hope, but I don't know, I'm not sure of the technology of the actual meeting, but I hope we have a chat. And of course, we will definitely have the opportunity for people in the audience to ask questions. John?
Okay, so for our last town hall, the way we understand it, some of the more consequential fallout from our history of racism in our society has been the barriers to homeownership that generations of people of color have had to deal with over the years. So there's a lot of interest right now in the history of redlining and blockbusting and restrictive CC&Rs in southern San Mateo County and really the whole region. So we're thinking that some exploration of the history and the consequences of this issue would really be interesting to a lot of folks and would be basically the basic topic of our next town hall meeting. And of course that the subject matter will be more refined as we get closer and people weigh in about how we should address that. The panel that we select for that one might include people who live in the areas that were targets of those policies. Bellhaven and East Palo Alto, right in our neighborhood. And ultimately we'd like to explore potential ideas for counteracting the effects of what are now, of course, illegal policies and practices. So that's where that one is potentially headed. Also, I guess I wanted to mention that over the last couple of months, there have been weekend meetings, Sunday meetings at the corner of Alpine and Portola Road, just after the demonstrations that have been taking place there, to talk about racism and equity in our society as a whole and in the town in general. And Jeff has been to all of them. I've managed to make 3 or 4 of them. Unfortunately, I missed the last one. But it's a really positive and kind of energizing thing to do, and learn a lot about how people think and some issues that we need to address. So I've taken the opportunity to ask people at each of those meetings that I've been to participate in our town portal and make more comments. We've had a small turnout. I think 10 people have put in their comments, and we could always use more. And hopefully that our ongoing town halls will generate more comments and more give and take. So that's where we are right now. I've been sort of binge reading books and running into availability issues, and I'm really glad that Anne Marie managed to find a solution to that. Several of them I wasn't gonna be able to read until next year sometime. So now that's resolved, so that's really good. Encourage everyone to dig in because they're really fascinating. That's any other questions for me?
Thank you both. Those, I mean, that list of that set of town halls is amazing. And having tried to wrangle people together for various events in the last few months, I know how hard it was to get those lineups. So well done. Good work on that. I'll say one more thing. Yeah, I think I've missed 2 of the BLM sort of post demonstration discussions since they started in June. It has been a really great group. It's ranged from like 5 people to I think 20 in a few of them. It's been a little quieter lately. I'm hoping maybe in the fall when people come back and it's a little cooler on Sundays, maybe a few more people come back out. But I agree with John. It's been a really good discussion group, and it's sort of a group of people that are really kind of trying to explore really be honest with themselves and others about their own biases, and it's been a really good exercise. Jeremy, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, we'd like to continue with a portion of the presentation.
I'm sorry.
No, not at all. It's fine. I want to turn it over to Brandon, who has a report on resource page. Brandon?
Yeah. So I had a meeting with Jeremy and Carrie earlier today. And basically, I am currently in the middle of developing a couple of digital resources to post both on the town's social media and also on the town's website. I think something really, really good about these town halls that are going to be happening, but also about having a actual kind of permanent portal on the town website is the fact that kind of as was mentioned, it helps bring people into the conversation. A really big part of having race and equity conversations is getting to the point where the people who have things to say feel comfortable being able to speak out and feel like they are able to enter these spaces and safely communicate the things that they're going through or the questions that they have. And basically how I'm trying to split that up is having different resource pages, both for different materials that people can access to educate themselves if they wish, like having the book lists as is currently being made available and movie lists, but also having a list of places that people can donate or current initiatives that people can participate in if they would like to get involved. I think having spaces where people are actively encouraged to get involved in passive ways is really important. Of course, being educated and learning about these issues is a big part of, I guess, going on this journey right now. But at the same time, it's also learning how to actively make these things part of the discussions that are happening around town and actively making these things a small part of our personal lives. So that's currently what I'm working on. I would also like to work with Carrie to develop a little bit of a social media campaign, both in putting out these flyers and in promoting the Zoom town halls that are currently happening. I think that being able to kind of develop a clear and concise narrative about here is how the town is approaching trying to address these issues, and being like, one, transparent, but also very, very upfront with all of these measures and getting them out there as much as possible, I think will really help in terms of broadening the conversation outside of the spaces that it's already currently happening in. And yeah, that's where I'm at as of thus far.
Great, thank you.
And then,
Does anybody have any questions for John, Marianne, or Brandon?
I just wanted to thank Marianne for the memo, which I guess is in the digest later too, and Rita, I guess wanted to say something about it as well. I think that it certainly addressed what I was asking for in terms of kind of rephrasing language and clarifying for the record what I think was intended in the first place, and the extra detail on that was helpful too. So thank you.
Yeah, I was going to comment. We'll pull that from the digest, and I was going to comment on that later as well. I see two hands up, and I apologize. I've been meaning to do this at the beginning of every meeting. I just wanted to remind people of our decorum policy. Just very simply, public speaking, just addressing the council, not calling out individuals or other audience members, no slanderous remarks, no interrupting, it's a little harder to do here, no disruptive behavior. Just asking people again to be respectful, address the question in front of us and address the whole council. Also a reminder that our guests, our public speakers are limited to 3 minutes per person. So with those, I will, Carolyn Vertonghen has her hand up. Go ahead, Carolyn.
and Caroline, you probably need to unmute it.
Unmute me.
Yep, there you go.
And welcome to the council or to our efforts. I'm a little concerned. You're new to the town, so you don't know what's been going on. And we hope that we can have your email address so we can inform you what has been going on, what we have disclosed, and what we feel has been the shortcomings. To the council members who are organizing this big problem, I'm afraid again that I hope you will not conduct these town hall meetings like you did with the affordable housing, where you bring in strangers and who have already their agenda in place. And even if we speak up, our concerns, our solutions are completely dismissed. It's a waste of time. You don't make progress like that. And we have been speaking up for a long time. If you really want a community, you have to listen to your constituents. The handbook says that you listen to the constituents. We don't see that. And so hopefully there will be change, and hopefully you will approach these events completely different than you approach the ones with the affordable housing. Thank you.
Thank you. Rita Combs has her hand up. Go ahead, Rita.
So Brandon, I'm happy to see that you are part of the committee and you're interested in the portal. So the information that is currently in the portal on this subject is based on the past couple of meetings. And there's been an update that I have been asking for a clarification. And at the last meeting, when I had asked once again for that clarification, Council Member Hughes made a suggestion for some wording, and I thought that was great, and that would be very nice. And last night when I was looking at what the update is, it's the update was made, but then it was then all this information about these different people that were tasered to death. And I'm not sure if this information came directly from the sheriff's department or where, but in order, I sent a letter last night to Jeremy and to Mayor Alves about that. But when we're doing this type of information, we need to then remove our own bias. And if we need then to hire an outside person to review this information or bring it to the Sunday after group, or perhaps Brandon and his group looks at it, somebody else needs to look at it before we post it, because this will keep people from coming to our town. If they look on the portal and they see this information, this is not welcoming information, and this information is incomplete. There are court cases against all of these police for these 4 different people, but the 3 people of color that were killed and then considered mentally challenged, you know, and to therefore justify why they were tasered to death, or drug addicts. And it's just misleading information. And it saddens me as a member of this community that this information is then now posted someplace on the portal representing this information on social justice for this town. And Brandon, I hope that you will then reach out to some of the members of color in this community so that you can have, I'm not sure if you live in this community, but that you can reach out to some of us so that we can then tell you what our issues are, because it doesn't seem like we're being invited to the table to have that conversation, except for what we want to post our personal information in a portal online with our name and address. So I'd like to, perhaps not our address, but I'd like to talk to you if you're going to be directing how that portal is. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I don't see any more public comments. Any other questions? I don't think there's any action items here, but is any other council member have questions or comments for John or Marianne at this point? Okay, thank you. I look forward to seeing those more about those events. Thank you all. We'll move on to item 6, recommendation about the OPEB trust payments. Jeremy.
Thank you, Mayor Alves, members of the council. The staff report before you is based on a recommendation from the Finance Committee at their last meeting. This is a similar recommendation that was made earlier this year, but COVID and other issues got in the way of bringing it forward. As you know, the council authorized the town's inclusion in a trust fund to pre-fund other post-employee benefits. Primarily, these are retiree health benefits. This trust fund is called CERP. We are now members of it and have an opportunity to begin that pre-funding. The Finance Committee has made a recommendation that the town pre-fund at the levels that are indicated in our annual audit. This is part of the GASB 75 recommendation that requires all cities to put in their annual auditing documents the liabilities associated with OPEB issues. The last audit, which will be coming actually to you at our next meeting, indicates it's about a $1.19 million liability. So the request from the Finance Committee is to fund at that level over the course of 4 payments over 4 quarters. In the staff report, I indicated that the council may want to wait until the budget presentation in September. That gives an opportunity to review our final calculations on the reserve assignments. The reserve assignments currently are, most of them are set at a particular level. The OPEB and the retirement assignments are set based on the audit report. So the current level is set at $823,000. So we would reset it at 1.19. What that means, though, is that general fund unassigned reserve would change in some fashion. We haven't completed those calculations yet because it's part of our budget process. But it is possible, based on making that change, that the general fund unassigned reserve assignment either goes up or down. My sense is it's not going to change too much because there were obviously some expenditures we didn't make last year. We did really well in our investments, but we haven't finalized that. So it may make some sense for the council to wait to make the final decision until the next meeting, or at least give staff some indication that they're interested but are awaiting that final amount, because it is a significant amount. I'm not terribly concerned from the perspective that we can cover certainly the payments, but it will have some effect on reserves. With that, available for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions for Jeremy? Craig, go ahead.
Jeremy, if we don't, I understand the request about potentially delaying the payments until we do the budget. I mean, that's not that far in the future. Would you write the check tomorrow if we were to authorize it today, or would it end up being about a month anyway?
Well, that's a very good question. So from a practical perspective, we are planning to not hold the August 26th council meeting, so there wouldn't be a check on there to pay. So the first meeting that could potentially be issued would be September 9th. So it would be about a month. I could certainly, under the emergency authority granted under the COVID emergency ordinance, to cut that check, but I don't think that's necessary. I would like to align this to something more than a random day in the middle of a month. I would like to align it with something that makes a little bit more sense, the start of a month or the start of a quarter. So that could be September 1st, it could be October 1st. I do think that though there is some benefit in waiting for the budget because of what I indicated before. I'm just not sure exactly where that number is going to end up based on our final calculations. And because the council has provided direction to staff to take something of what I would call a modest or conservative approach in the development of the budget, I think it makes some sense to see how that all shakes out before a final decision. But you could also tonight, through the chair, split it into two, that yes, we want to do this, but we want to wait. And that at least gives some indication to the finance committee that you're supportive if that's the way you want to go.
Anne, go ahead. You're muted.
Sorry, this is in the question category. What did we use in the extension budget that we're using now, or in terms of your number for this, Jeremy, was this the 800,000 or was it up at the 119?
We rolled over all of the 1920 reserve assignments.
So it
would have been zero
to actually pay out. Yeah, but we do have that, the unreserved reserve earmark or whatever you want to call it. We had some amount there, which would have probably been about the 800K.
Yeah, I was just trying to make sure it was in that budget, that the budget we approved, it was there. However, we distinguished it, and it was at the lower level. That was really what I wanted to confirm. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I'm just going to make sure I understand the premise here. The finance committee is recommending that we prepay these liabilities for the same reasons that we prepaid our pension obligation back in 2014, just to basically avoid, because we will save money in the long run by sort of canceling out that short fund and not basically paying interest or not having to worry about sort of future investments covering it. Is that the same premise as previously?
In a word, yes.
It's technically different, Jeff, in that what we're doing is we're putting this money in a trust fund that's allowed to invest in things that the town itself is not allowed to invest in.
Right.
So we're not, with the previous money, we actually paid it to CalPERS against the liability that we owed. So it's in our CalPERS account now, and we can't get that money back. With the OPEB money, it's slightly different in that the trust, I believe, will still, it'll still show up on the town's accounts, but it'll be essentially a reserved account that can earn a better rate of interest. So we won't have yet paid OPEB the money. The trust will pay OPEB the money as the bills come due, but it means that for the liability we know we have, we're going to get a better rate of return on it in the meantime. So it's similar reasoning for the 2014 payment, but just a different mechanism.
So it's as if that unfunded liability designation on our budget is still on our budget, but it sits in a different account than the rest.
Well, we have an offsetting account to pay for it.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
You're using, Jeff, your assets to generate a higher rate of return. So that at the time when you ultimately pay it, you'll have more money to pay it.
It's slightly confusing because CalPERS is running the trust fund, but it's not. It's separate from CalPERS' regular.
CalPERS is running the OPEB trust fund, and then, or CalPERS is running its own trust fund for the CalPERS liability, or both?
No, it's the former.
Okay. CalPERS runs we pay to a trust fund, CalPERS manages it, and then they pay it out to some other, is it just to the various providers, or is it some other entity that actually kind of delivers the post-retirement healthcare itself?
CalPERS delivers the post benefits. Yeah.
So we form the trust, and then basically they pay out to meet those future when the bills come due for post-employment benefits. CalPERS pays it from that trust.
It's something that's going to be really require a lot of attention going forward because of the fact that a lot of municipalities aren't going to be able to cover their liabilities. We're in that fortunate position still where we have enough assets, and in combination with a higher return we can generate through this vehicle, we should still be in fine shape, relative to meeting our future obligations. I would suggest that the thing that'll be most interesting going forward is just to see how well CalPERS does, because it's a very difficult time for a lot of municipalities. They're not in the same spot we are.
It's helpful to the council. The current total market value at market close on the 11th of August was $12.5 billion. The mix, I'm doing the percentages in my head, it looks like about 50%, a little above, is in global equity. Fixed income is about 25%, and then the remainder is in TIPS, treasury, and inflation protected securities, real estate, investment trusts, and commodities. So it's an interesting mix.
It's pretty aggressive.
Yeah.
John, go ahead.
Are we ready for comments? Because that's what I was going to do here.
No, tell you what, I will ask for public comments, and then we can do our comments and a motion. Does anyone in the public want to speak on this issue? Okay, I do not see any. John, why don't you go ahead and comment?
Okay. Overall, I think this sounds like the right approach. I just am always leery about aggressive investing. I mean, I know it's just a term they're used because it's not all that aggressive, but yeah, I'd hate to see it disappear or go south at some point as we, depending on what kind of term it has locked into it, or and I don't know if that's something that we know at this point, if it's totally liquid, or having the assurance that we're putting our money into a safe spot. That's what I want to know.
No, it's a good point. Anne, did you want to make comments right now, or?
Sure. I mean, I think, and I appreciate your comment, John, because it's always been sort of a level of comfort that the finance committee has, and obviously we as the sort of stewards of the town's finances have. And what I was just interested in the numbers Jeremy said is they've reduced their global equity from 59 to 50. And I think that's probably a good reduction in this current environment. But given the longer term nature of these dollars, I think the finance committee's approach is relatively conservative. I mean, they never wavered, quite honestly, and certainly we could consider a slightly less aggressive approach because there are alternatives to this one. This was the most, and we could come back to somewhere lower percentage equity, in a different mix of asset classes. So I think that's certainly within our purview. And I'd favor waiting for the final budget, because I think I really want to see, and we could make the determination of both of those. I mean, the one thing I did want to see, but I know that it wasn't part of their recommendation to us, was what the other sort of less aggressive allocation percentages look like today. To your point, is it 30% equities, 35, 40? I don't know the answer because that's not what they recommended. So I think it's certainly reasonable to ask what that might look like, so we can at least get that spectrum, from highest risk to lowest risk, and land in a place where everybody's comfortable. And I think, to me, that's number one. And number two is I would wait to make sure that we're comfortable with how much we're going to end up with in this year's budget. So the more finely tuned that is, I think the better it will be for us, for the town.
Craig, go ahead.
Sure. Yeah, I'd favor waiting to make the first payment and decide what the amount of that payment is until the budget too. I think we can certainly. I think I'm comfortable with doing it, but what the actual dollar amount is that we want to do, I think we should figure out as part of the budget process. And so if we want to do 4 payments between now and June 30th. we can schedule those out through the budget, I think would be a good way to do it, to make sure that it lines up with our cash flows. And as money comes in and out of the accounts, we're not going to end up, you know, I'm not going to say short, but that our checking account ends up with not, you know, an uncomfortably low amount of money in some period because we happen to write the check on the wrong day. So I think doing that through the budget process would make sense, and the extra month isn't going to make a dramatic difference here. In terms of the mix of securities, these OPEB liabilities are really quite long-term liabilities. They're somewhere in the sort of, I don't know what the average is, but it's probably in the sort of 15 to 20 year range. And so, yes, this is a fairly equity heavy portfolio when you're thinking about kind of retirement account type investing, but it's not, we're not going to need to spend this money in the near future. So even if the market, you know, bounces up and down, an overall more what you might call aggressive mix is probably the right blend for something that's a kind of 15 to 20 year liability. There are more conservative blends, but they have, you know, lower returns as well. And the purpose of this is really to balance the town's ability to generate income off of its other assets, and you know, anything we're holding in LAIF or anywhere else will be safer, but the rate of return is lower. And the mix between what we're still going to have in our LAIF funds and what we can take advantage of with this OPEB trust fund is, in my view, they kind of balance out. So you shouldn't consider the profile of just this investment and ignore the other, whatever it is. If we take $1 million out of our 13, there's still about 12 left that's earning 1% in, you know, super secure investments. It essentially allows us to take the portion of our liabilities that are these longer term things and earn a better rate of return on it. And it is a little bit riskier, but the duration of the timeline, it kind of balances that out. So I'm supportive of the concept of investing in this, you know, more aggressive portfolio, but the timing really I'd like to do as part of the budget process, just to make sure that we're being cautious there.
Okay, thank you. Mary Ann, thoughts? I think you're muted.
My son completely redid this whole system, and I don't know how to operate it anymore. That's the problem with having the millennials around during COVID. I implicitly trust Craig and Ann and the Finance Committee, so I am comfortable with the suggestion that we wait until after we approve the budget and we figure out the first payment then. That is all I have to say.
Okay. I'm all for this, the overall concept. I think this is just a prudent thing to do. I'm totally on board with that. I mean, I would be fine. There's no harm at this point in waiting for the budget, so we know exactly what we're dealing with. So I don't mind waiting. I would probably be fine writing the check tomorrow too, but I'm happy to wait. You know, for a long term, you know, knowing that our need is growing and knowing that we have a long investment horizon, I agree with Craig. This is probably, you know, a pot of cash where we should be aggressive. I'm happy to look at the options, but I would probably, you know, I'd probably say this is the time. You know, this is when you're looking at a long-term thing. This is when you do want to actually try to maximize your return over that long term. So, happy to look at the options, but I would probably be fine with you know, starting to pay into this and starting to invest it at sort of that higher equity level, so the 50% equity level. But happy to hear more on this as the budget is done and we're ready to move on. So, Jeremy, go ahead.
Through the chair, when we go to Finance Committee, which will be early September to review the budget, I'll make sure that there's an item on here to discuss the strategies as well, and that the Finance Committee can make a more explicit recommendation. And just for everyone on the meeting tonight, there are 3 strategies that a municipality can choose from. And since we're talking about global equity is one of the main factors, that range is from 59% to 22%. So it can be very different depending on your ability to your comfort level, if you will. So we'll have that as part of the budget.
Okay. So it sounds like, do you want an action on this tonight, or could we wait and just approve everything when the budget is done, or do you want sort of a decision on the actual whether or not to go forward with it?
Through the chair, I don't think it's necessary to take action tonight, but I will let the chair of the Finance Committee know that the council affirmed their desire to begin this process with further consultation with the Finance Committee as part of the budget.
Everyone okay with that? Okay. All right. Then we'll, with that direction to staff and the Finance Committee, we'll move on, and we will not take an action on this tonight.
Thank you.
Okay. Next up is item 7, liaison reports. Anne, you got anything? You're muted.
Yes, we had we had a little bit of a break in here with our meetings. Back in July 24th, we had the field users meeting. And as I think you all know, that's been a very hot topic relative to trying to come up with a way that some of our youth sports leagues can start and resume play, or not play, but to at least have the opportunity to work out as you know, individuals with coaches, et cetera, and training exercises. And frankly, Kate Hamill from the Alpine Strikers was incredible in terms of the amount of work and research she did on that really benefited all of the leagues, because they just researched the heck out of all the requirements, everything that was happening at the county and state level, and really came up with, I think, a very comprehensive plan to be able to start on a limited basis for the older teen players in the Alpine Strikers League, and sort of square driven exercises that they would perform, each staying within their square and using their own balls. So there was no sharing of equipment, no merging, and masked and socially distanced, and it was incredibly detailed. And so at that point, I think that the committee was very comfortable in letting them kind of be the pioneers of the first trial of what could work in a COVID era, and assuming that it was overseen and monitored, et cetera. And I think, Jeremy, isn't that date, did it start, or is it starting next week?
It has started with the older Alpine Strikers, and we're expanding to the younger next week.
That's great. That's great. They were incredibly organized, and I think the other leagues, frankly, benefited from their work. And you'll hear in a moment about some other things, because what took off in the discussion that day from there was there going to be the opportunity, for instance, for the pickleballers to, you know, hit the courts again too. And in the discussion, you know, it was Steve Levine was there representing that group, and he's incredibly thoughtful as well, and took away from that meeting all of the information Alpine Strikers had prepared for their group to understand the protocols that would be required for any of these sports relative to hygiene and you know, making sure you're maintaining all the social distancing things. And they, since that time, have been working on a very robust program, and I think Jeremy may give an update on that in a little bit, for how that might return. And so there's still some mushiness, if you will, in that whole, how that might work, because part of it depends on whether they're considered classes versus play, because adult sports are not supposed to resume according to the California Public Health Department rules and regulations that we all saw today on the call. But because this is more of a class environment, and again, I think Jeremy and his team have done a really good job in working through that with them and trying to work to see what, if anything, could be done on the pickleball front. So it was a very robust, very big meeting. And again, I think super productive. So I'll try and move it fast. There have been 2 major meetings on the airport roundtable front. The first was one directly with the FAA to talk about their new route plans for night flights. It's called the Hush route, that goes out over the bay as opposed to flying down the peninsula. And there had been, since the select committee in 2017, the request had been made to route as many flights as possible during the nighttime hours. And the FAA, after 2.5, almost 3 years of analysis, came back and said, we can move some, but it'll only be from 1 a.m. to 5 a.m. And that's not a high volume time. Although, you know, in the old days when we had more flights, there was more that was actually starting to fill into that time slot, principally on the cargo side out of Oakland, because that's when all the all the FedEx and UPS and international cargo flights are coming in and out of Oakland. So at any rate, the bottom line was there was a lot of discussion about it. It's in process. I think it will happen. And I'm synthesizing down a ton of discussion relative to that, but it was a good meeting with the FAA, and it's always good when they participate in that. The next meeting was the BPAC meeting, Bicycle Pedestrian Committee at the county level. And that meeting was really more about, and I'm just going back to my notes, what they're working on, what the group is working on is a comprehensive bicycle and ped plan that started well ahead of pre-COVID era. And they're still starting to try and figure out the weighting of the variables. What I found a little interesting is that, they've used an outside firm to help do this. There didn't seem to be any adjustment for COVID. I think there was the underlying assumption that I found a little bit interesting was that there was going to be no change, yet much of what was talked about were transit centers, including Caltrains, which at the time, it's still obviously. So while I'm happy to see the work proceeding, there's another part of me that says a lot of this could really change going forward, just depending on where things land at the sort of whatever new normal emerges out of this time period, but they are moving forward. And then the next one, I do want to get some input from all of you, because this next one was last week's San Francisco Roundtable meeting, which was a week ago today. And the big and hot item there, as it was 6 years ago, is whether or not to expand the membership to include Palo Alto. As you may recall, and just very briefly, the membership in the roundtable consists of San Francisco County and the mayor's office and a series of other offices, all of San Mateo County. And obviously each city is represented by one of us on that committee. And then nothing south of, Rosati's. So since we're sitting right on the Santa Clara border, and the whole discussion has always been, given what happened with NextGen in 2017, the planes don't stop on Alpine Road. They're heading into Los Altos, Los Altos Hills, Palo Alto, and Palo Alto particularly was impacted by the convergence of all the routes using the next-gen technology that are coming in very, very low over Palo Alto. And Palo Alto, I will add, has been extremely active. They are not only part of their group down out of the Santa Clara, the SCSC, they call Santa Clara Santa Cruz group, but they have attended all of the roundtable meetings. They speak at every meeting, and they speak on every agenda item. They're super active. So what the discussion was in this first meeting was to just review the process for admitting new members, because the airport roundtable operates under a memorandum of understanding that's been in place for about 30 years, and it's funded principally by the airport. So they're picking up the lion's share of the cost. We all have dues that are paid by each of the member cities, and not all cities, I would add, in San Mateo County participate. East Palo Alto does not, nor does it just went out of my brain. Where are the the graveyards? All of the Coma. Thank you. It came. So Coma doesn't either. So those two do not participate, have not participated. They're always given the opportunity to, but have chosen not to. So at any rate, in order, and this is where it comes back to all of us, in order to admit a new member to the roundtable, it first requires a 2/3 vote of all of the members of the roundtable. But in giving our votes, we obviously need to poll our colleagues relative to their willingness or what they think about the idea or not think about it, because it also requires a 2/3 vote at each council. So yeah, it's a very stringent standard, obviously. And traditionally, the North counties have not favored, when we lost this just at the roundtable level, not even at the council levels. When this was brought up, as I said, about 6 years ago, it didn't get out of the roundtable to come back to all of us, to all of you, just because the North counties were opposed to having any new members. They always were, their concern always being that the roundtable was focusing too much on arrivals, because that's Palo Alto's issue, and that it had been formed principally, again, decades earlier in reaction to the departure noise. So they have just felt it was a dilution of the sort of power, if you will. But clearly the counter argument to that is how can you argue that Palo Alto is not being affected by the arrivals traffic? Because clearly, and I know enough of us travel to Palo Alto to have experienced it in Palo Alto and other areas, Sunnyvale, Los Altos Hills, Los Altos, et cetera. So that's the question for all of you, to see what your thinking is, if you have an opinion. I think certainly my view is, if they are being impacted by noise generated by flights arriving at SFO, they should be included in the community and have at least one voice. And I think, honestly, it would probably be a positive development in that it would at least, because they would have a representative in those meetings going forward, they wouldn't probably be able to commandeer as much of the public time, because that representative would be there to represent their views. And quite honestly, they speak a lot more than any of us on the round table do, because again, they're speaking on each agenda item. So I think I've always felt that it is not, and you look at equity in this situation, and in this case, they really are being harmed. The community's being harmed by, very significant noise, at least during pre-COVID flight levels. I think it's obviously better right now, but we can expect or hope that it'll go back to something approaching what it might have been in the past. So any input, I'm open to hear it.
I, for one, thought the initial decision not to include them was kind of petty and short-sighted. So I think, we're being affected by arrivals too. The idea that this group can't address both departures and arrivals is kind of silly to me. Having more people, having another large, jurisdiction on your side, just more public opinion on your side seems like a good thing to me. I never saw the rationale really for not including them in the first place when it came up. So that's my 2 cents. What other people think? Marianne.
I was at that meeting. I think that Anne was not available, and so I subbed for her. That was the first and the last roundtable meeting I ever attended. I told her I would never go again. It was disgusting how my friends in the northern cities just said, no, you can't be part of our club. Of course they should be part of it. And we're always stronger when we work together. And frankly, their people who were there spoke much more eloquently than the people from the north who were saying, do not come into our house. So I am an enthusiastic supporter of adding Palo Alto to the roundtable.
Greg, go ahead.
And is East Palo Alto a member and they just don't show up, or they're not admitted as a member?
They're not admitted as a member.
I was just wondering if Palo Alto could do a deal with East Palo Alto if they're not interested in showing up, and Palo Alto is. They pay the membership fee for East Palo Alto, and East Palo Alto appoints a delegate who happens to be Palo Alto's choice.
I think you're getting a little complicated.
But maybe easier than getting 2/3 of the counties in the north.
Adrian Fine could dress up as Carlos. And
yeah, exactly.
There you go.
Just put on the beard.
Oh, put a little ponytail on him.
Yeah, the ponytail. Yeah.
I think there have been, just so you know, there have been regular reach outs to East Palo Alto every year about them wanting them to participate. And to date, they just haven't wanted to do that. Mm-hmm. It's an open invitation. They could call tomorrow and be at the next meeting.
It is noisy there. I don't know what air traffic they're getting, but I'm over there quite a lot and I hear airplanes.
No. Yeah, it's never limited. Sorry.
Yeah, those planes come over. The reason I was asking about East Palo Alto, those planes come over Palo Alto, and before they get to the bay from Palo Alto, you got to go over East Palo Alto. So I'm sure that all the same issues are there. It may just not be as high on the agenda of the East Palo Alto City Council.
Well, I would suggest that East Palo Alto will benefit from, and has to date even, from all of Palo Alto's efforts, because they are incredibly organized and knowledgeable. As Marianne said, they come loaded for bear in terms of every meeting, and they're attending all the technical working groups, all of the subcommittees, and there's a lot of them, and they're at all of them. They're the most active participant of any city or town is Palo Alto. Mm-hmm.
John's been waiting. John, go ahead.
I am totally on board. It never made any sense that they were not part of the discussion. I mean, as Marianne said, the more people that are on that side of the table, the more influence they're going to have.
Yeah.
It's logical. Right?
So
Great.
you move forward. It sounds to me like you've got 5. So
Great.
I think we're all good with it.
Well, our next, and then I will have that feedback for everybody at our next meeting. And I think we encouraged all people to go back, all of the representatives go back and sort of start the discussion with their council to bring back some input. So thank you for that. I appreciate it. And then other than that, Craig and I were both part of a website wireframe meeting this morning to continue that effort. And it's very exciting. You can see that it's going to be a very, very positive change. And Carrie and Brandy are doing a great job at sort of moving it forward. And that's it.
Great. Okay, John is up next.
Yeah, I had none. No meetings.
Good for you. Okay. Craig.
Did you say Marianne?
No, Craig.
Oh, you said Greg. Yeah, the one thing that's really nice about the new website. I mean, it's got a nice new look and everything, and latest technology, all that stuff. But I think that the biggest change is going to be it's going to just be much easier for staff to keep it up to date, to edit things, change things on the homepage, add links to special events, all that kind of stuff. So, and it should work much better on phones also, which an increasing percentage of our traffic is phones. Let's see, the other meeting I had was, whoops, not that folder. BPTS. And the big issue there was Windy Hill parking and the situation around both on Portola Road and then over towards the Alpine side with just the volume of cars that are parked there on a regular basis now. So Sergeant Andy Sue from the Sheriff's Department, who's our he kind of manages the patrols in Portola Valley, and he said he'll have his patrol folks focus on that area during heavy parking days, and he has worked with them to help them understand, which has been an issue past, what kinds of citations they can write. So in the past, there's been some reluctance to write no parking tickets, but they can actually cite under the municipal code because our municipal code allows us to have the signs that we have there. So that issue of the signage and what citations was resolved a while ago, but it's kind of taken a while to percolate down to the feet on the street. So they understand it now. They also know if they if they just want to do a warning instead of a citation. The committee has shared with them the location of the secret box with the little flyers that they can stick under the windscreen that tell people about where they should be parking and how not to park, and about the potential civil code violations and all that stuff. So they'll be escalating a little bit the enforcement side to try and make things a little bit better behaved than they have been, especially the last couple of weeks. There used to be a lot of volume, and now the volume has sort of not gone down, but the behavior has gotten a little bit worse. I think people were at least trying to pay some attention to where they were parking, and that's just gotten a lot worse. So the committee's working on it, the sheriff's office working on it. I know staff has been working on it for a long time, like Jeremy and Howard, in terms of various temporary solutions, but this is looking more and more like it's not necessarily a temporary problem, at least if this, at least for as long as COVID continues. We'll probably have this load of use of the facilities, and even beyond that, I think a lot of people have just discovered that we've got, Windy Hill is a nice place to go hiking, and so they may continue coming here even after. And I know Jeremy has an update too. Probably he has met with the folks from MROSD about their parking lot and potential changes there, so he can probably give us an update on that. That was the main focus of the discussion. They were also talking about budget submission for the updated budget for September, but all of their budget items are events where they have people do bike rodeos and things, and that's not going to be happening for the next year or so. So they will probably be asking us for less than they typically do because of that. And that was pretty much it. And that's all I had.
Okay. Thank you. Mary Ann, you're up.
Okay, I only had one committee meeting, but then I also had a board meeting, and I did have 4 Zooms, and I just wanted to briefly mention them. I had a flood and sea level rise resiliency district meeting on the 10th. The legislative analyst's office released a report called "What Threat Does Sea Level Rise Pose to California?" which really goes to the heart of why our district is so important. So if I get a copy of that, I will send it to my colleagues. Dave Pine talked a lot about SB 795, which is a Jim Bell stimulus bill that is mostly about housing and homelessness, but there is some money for climate resilience that will go to the Strategic Growth Council and Coastal Conservancy. So it's possible we can get some money there. As you know, we have funding for 3 years and that's it. So we're going to have to get some dedicated funding and every bit of money we can have to keep alive. Len Matterman, our CEO, gave a report on the Bayfront Canal. Let's see. There is this early warning flood system, kind of like the Zone Haven thing for fire. And there was a grant from the state that we received to do an early warning flood system. And I guess they want to do it, I think they want to do it in Colma Creek. I think it was Colma Creek. It's the place where when you have a storm and a high tide, there's big flooding. What else? And Dave also said that the ad hoc committee that is supposed to look at funding and financing is going to start meeting. Then the rest of our meeting, which was intensely interesting, was a closed session, and I cannot speak of it. And there were no reportable actions. So I just wanted to mention that between July 28th and August 6th, I watched 4 Zooms. One was put on by the Palo Alto Park and Rec about Foothills Park. You know, their question, should we open our park to non-residents? So I watched that one. And on that panel was our very own Alex Von Felt, who used to be on the Planning Commission. She is the, I think she's called Executive Director of Grassroots Ecology, and she was really, really good, by the way. I watched on July 29, part 2 of Racial and Social Injustice in America. I had seen part 1. I really would recommend that people check both of them out. You can see them. I think it's called Mid-Penn
Media.
Yeah, they're really good. The moderator, Allison Hobbs, we tried to get for our moderator, but she is not available. Anyway, it was really good. And then I tuned into Fire and Flora, Restoring Healthy Balance. That one was sponsored by Grassroots Ecology, also included Mid-Penn. The person from Mid-Penn was Craig Beckman. I did ask the question, as I said I would, in the chat. I said, hey, do you have any plans to do fire management on Windy Hill? And Craig said, let me get his response. So I just saw this and realized I should have told Jeremy. He said that if you go onto their website, there is a map for Windy Hill with areas of concern, and that what they're trying to decide is, what do we do now? What's most urgent? What can we put off? And he specifically talked about the area behind the sequoias, the Alpine Road escape route around Coal Mine Ridge, and a lot of brush mid-slope of Windy Hill. And he said, please provide input now. Jeremy, do you know what that means?
The MROSD has not reached out specifically to us. I'll reach out again. The last time that we engaged on this was about 2 months ago when they presented their overall fire management plan, and it was clear that they weren't funding anything anytime soon. So
well, you might mention that I was a participant in the audience of that meeting. I asked the question and Craig answered it, and I wrote in the margins, provide input now.
I know Craig real well. I'll give him a call.
I know, yeah. And then the last Zoom I watched, which I believe John watched, was called Youth Rising Up. So it featured young folks. And the moderator was Julie, I'm not sure how to say her name, Lycott Hames. And it was definitely worth watching. If you want a moderator who is going to ask really hard questions, she's your girl. And like, for instance, this was one of her questions. What's the most difficult, uncomfortable thing we must confront to become the America we want to be? A lot of time they just didn't answer, but she eventually got to the heart of it. Anyway, that is a good one too. I think that is on the Almanac and the Palo Alto Daily. Their parent company, I think, sponsored this one. So you could go on their site and they may have the video.
Embarcadero.
Embarcadero, yes, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. I had one meeting I actually filled in for John, Conservation Committee. Sort of the probably the main thing they talked about of interest was the they were sort of talking about input on the Stanford Wedge project. They had a fairly long discussion of it. They formulated a list of recommendations they're going to pass on to ASCC, I believe, if I remember that correctly. A lot of it was just around vegetation in and around the area that's being considered for development. The other question that came up was just watershed and how are these buildings sort of being sensitive to the various just water movement around that property. Those are the main things. I think it was just sort of I think there was just general kind of concern over the project there, understandably, and the public was obviously concerned, but they did formulate put together some recommendations in terms of sort of the project itself and what they would suggest in terms of, just site layout. So, they'll pass those comments on to ASCC. That was the one meeting I had. Oh, because a couple of residents are on who are asking about this, and I've been talking to them. Peninsula Clean Energy is, we're working with Sunrun right now to start rolling out the Solar Plus battery program for fire areas. And so I was told that they should have something, that Sunrun should be ready to start talking to people about projects out here this week, probably the end of the week, maybe early next week at this point. But they are ready to start a sort of, Sunrun will be offering batteries that are at a discount because they sort of help PCE meet some of its reliability requirements. So they should be a much more affordable battery solution that could get people through public shutdowns if they happen over this fall, and they likely will. That's the other thing I had is stay tuned for that. I will make sure people know about that when it comes live. That's all I had. So I think we can move on to the town manager report. Jeremy?
Thank you. In no particular order. I am working with our building official on getting the update to the building code for the home hardening related items that came out of the wildfire preparedness committee going. Our timeline looks like we'll start the work a little later this month, and we expect it to be at council by your meeting in December. So we should be able to move that along. Had a good conversation with them recently about that. You may have read in the paper that West Nile virus was discovered in Los Altos Hills. I had a conversation this morning with our representative at the Vector Control Agency, so they're taking that very seriously. I wouldn't be surprised if they put some traps in town to see if they find it here in Portola Valley. Tomorrow night, Portola Valley School District is going to be voting on their plan to reopen the schools. I'm going to be joining that call just to send our best wishes to the staff and all the hard work that they've done. I don't know, Craig, you had anything you wanted to add to that? Because we had a conversation today with their board president.
Yeah, it's been tough for them. As the state has changed the rules a couple times under their feet, and balancing kids being, in class for the best education versus not in class for the best reduction of spreading the virus and keeping not just the kids but the staff and teachers safe. They've really had to do a ton of work this summer, and obviously schools, typically during the summer that's their time off. So they've kind of gone above and beyond to put together something that is certainly not ideal, but it's about as good as you could do, I think, in the current situation. So they'll be putting that forward tomorrow.
I didn't get a chance to mention during the race and equity conversation that the portal remains open. People do continue to add their thoughts and ideas to it, although it has slowed a bit. And as you heard earlier from Brandon, there's going to be an effort to reinvigorate that. I wanted to expand a little bit on the Alpine Strikers experience. So far, so good. I got some wonderful pictures from Kate Hamill Monday night. The kids were having a wonderful time. I should say the young people were having a wonderful time. The expansion to the younger kids is a little more challenging than utilizing Russ Miller because it's over at Zotz, and working closely with the owners of Alpine Inn and Alpine Strikers to work through a schedule that doesn't cause heartache related to parking and traffic. And I think we've come up with that. We're going to experiment with a Monday through Wednesday and weekend mornings for the younger kids. We think that works. So we've worked with the owners at Alpine Inn to, we've indicated that we're taking back a little bit of the parking at the end of the lot that has become kind of their overflow to have a drop-off zone for the kids. So we're going to try it out. Everybody's in contact with one another, including directly Alpine Inn and Alpine Strikers. So if any problems come up, I think we're all on deck for that. Just an update on the visitations to our YouTube channel. The 2 June meetings have become our most popular. The numbers are low, but 13 and 15 views respectively. There is more to come from me through the subcommittee on having the Sheriff's Office contract cities engaged in a broader conversation around race and equity, and also our contracts. Well, many cities are going to that contract year this year. So a couple of the cities are just waiting to get some of their council members appointed to various subcommittees. Then they'll be available to hold that meeting. Craig talked a bit about Windy Hill parking. I'd like to just add that I've had a good conversation with MROSD just about keeping our options open as we move forward and making sure that they're fully engaged. They understand the breadth of the conversation that may need to take place in town. And our chair of the BPTS committee at Holland is just doing a lot of great work. And I think we're going to focus a lot of the initial thinking and outreach at that committee, including likely some sort of outreach. It might be a special meeting of the committee with Willowbrook residents who are seeing pretty significant parking challenges. Finally, very soon we will be opening up the Sequoia Trail. I want to tip my hat to the new ED at the Sequoias, Rob Hayes, and the chair of our Trails Committee, Gary Hanning. The 3 of us had a great conversation, and that's continued over the last week or so to find a system that works. We think we have one, including actually having the trail closed a couple times a week just for Sequoias residents so they can come out. And that's going to be managed by our volunteers at the Trails Committee. The thread through the last couple items is Howard. Howard has been working an incredible amount of time to make sure this all happens pretty seamlessly. So I just wanted to thank him publicly for his work. With that, that concludes my report. Thank you.
Anne, go ahead.
Jeremy, would you mind briefly updating the group about the CBAG, Commercial Business Assistance Grants?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes.
Right.
Okay.
Thank you for reminding me. So far, we have had 5 applicants, and that's been great. I think Ann and I are surprised we haven't had more. So there'll be an additional amount of outreach from me to the what we believe are the eligible businesses in town later this week. And we will ask them to get that to us by, I think, the end of the month. Seems like a good time frame to do that. But we're really delighted. Actually, the day that I sent out the email that had comments from Anne introducing the program, we received 3 applications immediately. And we've had 2 over the last 6 days since then. So it seems to be successful so far. Yeah.
Could I
go
just add one more thing? And I wanted to make sure to thank Cara for her work on it, because she provided the key that made it possible to do it relatively quickly by substituting any income tests or sort of level of destruction wrought by COVID on economics, by suggesting that we really just use an affidavit under which all of the tenants and all of the business owners would obviously warrant that they had suffered under COVID and economic hardship who had been part of it. So thank you, Cara, for coming up with, I think, an excellent way in which we were able to move it forward quickly.
Okay. Other questions or comments on Jeremy's report? All right. I guess we will move on to digests. July 23rd. Anyone want to pull anything? Okay. July 30th. Anything to pull? Any comments? Okay. August 6th, we actually had comments about item 4 during the earlier discussion on race and equity, so I believe we've covered that. Anything else to pull? Okay. If that's the case, then I believe we are ready to adjourn.
Good night, everyone.
Thanks,
Good night,
everyone.
all.
Good night.
Good night. Stay well.
You.